you will not be working in the future. You will literally be just receiving the state pension or nothing. But if you do engage with AI, you have a bright future. And that future better be a broad set of AIs, because otherwise the platinum workforce becomes a platinum layer on top of a rusty, horrible workforce. The augmented people will take over. That's for sure. Let's hope that the augmented people means the entire workforce.
Yo, it's the future, don't hit the snooze. AI is here giving humans the boost. Team Humans rolling, brains in the game with Dan Turchin. Y'all remember the name. People reign in the mix, no stopping the flow. Better work, better life, yeah, we're ready to go. Robots and humans, a collab, you know. Okay, let's start the show.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work, episode 396. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. If you like what we do, you owe it to humanity to share this episode or any other that you've enjoyed with just one friend. They'll know that you care about a future that involves both humans and machines. We're all in this together. If you haven't yet subscribed to the weekly newsletter, do it. There's a link to subscribe in the show notes. If you leave a comment, I just may share it in an upcoming episode, like this one from Luis in Brooklyn, who's a startup accountant. Luis's favorite episode is number 139 from the Wayback Machine with Daniel Marcus, founder and CTO of April, and the former CTO of Waze, about the future of AI to do your taxes. It's a fun one. We'll link to that one in the show notes. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly, and of course, the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact. Here it is for today. Michelle Faverio and Emma Kikuchi write at pewresearch.org about how Americans view AI based on new data from Pew Research, one of my favorite sources. In it, they say half of U.S. adults increased use of AI in daily life, which has made them feel more concerned than excited. Just 10% say they're more excited than concerned. Another 38% say they're equally concerned and excited. 37% were concerned when Pew Research first started asking the same question in 2021, so a bit of a shift there. Americans were more likely to say AI will have a positive than negative impact on medical care in the US over the next 20 years. Views were more negative for other areas. For example, only about a quarter of those surveyed said AI would have positive impacts on education and how people do their jobs, that coming in at only 23%. 65% of American workers still say they don't use AI much or at all in their job. Hard to believe. My commentary on this one, that US adults don't trust AI should come as no surprise. A very non-scientific survey of headlines confirms that most AI discussion is either about the technology, how it's enriching tech tycoons, or how it's replacing jobs. By contrast, adults in every other country surveyed by Pew felt less threatened by AI, with South Korean and French adults feeling the most optimistic. In both those countries, 49% of adults are more excited than concerned about AI versus 38% in the US. Let's shift the narrative. AI is giving us back at least an hour a day. As a thought exercise, think about what you'll do with your extra hour. Consider spending more time with loved ones, enjoying the outdoors, pursuing a hobby, or being a better parent, spouse, or friend. AI only knows what we tell it, and it only does what we give it permission to do. Be vigilant and protect your data, but don't fall victim to the narrative about what AI will do to you. Instead, focus on what AI will do with you and for you to make you a better human. This is a very germane to today's conversation. Trond Undheim is a renowned futurist, research scholar in innovation, or at least a past innovation scholar at Stanford University. And he has been a venture partner at Antler. He's the CEO and co-founder of Yegi, an insight network for experts, and has been a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. His work has been featured in Forbes, the Boston Globe, Fast Company, Fortune, and MIT News. In the past, he's hosted the popular Futurized podcast, and he's the author of 8 books, including the recently released Platinum Workforce, How to Train and Hire for the 21st Century's Industrial Transitions. Trond received his PhD in AI and cognition from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. And without further ado, Trond, my new friend, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Share a bit more about that background and how you got into space.
Well, I'm so excited, Dan, to be here. And I think we are, from what I understand, pretty aligned. This is a very interesting time, and I'm going to use the big word, in history, but everybody says so. And the question is, of course, what do I have to say about it? Because everyone is now thinking of themselves as an expert on AI, and it's very easy to fake experthood. And the contrast is huge because we are also, like you said from your survey, even really deep experts in their domains are very scared of AI, and perhaps for good reason. And I guess my background has prepared me better than many for this moment, given that I've always been interdisciplinary. And I think, in my background, I've worked for governments, I've run or helped many startups in very different domains, and I have been most recently at Stanford studying risk and systemic risk to civilization, but also affecting enterprises and understanding the area of risk. But before that, I was an innovation scholar at Stanford, and I also launched at MIT, and I launched Startup Exchange, which was a big platform connecting startups and corporations through MIT. So with that, I think working on emerging technologies has really kind of been in my lifeblood since my PhD, and it's an interesting time. But like you pointed out, it's not a time where you can let AI or any technology take over your life. But as we will get into, that is a difficult challenge. And for the first time, perhaps, it is one that challenges expert and novice equally. And we can really get back to that point because I think it's overlooked slightly in this AI debate. But this is a moment that challenges a software engineer. It challenges professors and especially universities teaching knowledge, because knowledge itself is becoming superfluous, which means that education, perhaps, as an institution is superfluous. There's a lot of impacts here. But as you pointed out, people, individuals, are not superfluous. And there's a lot of things that my book, Platinum Workforce, talks about. And, we can't see it very easily here, but basically, we'll get into that. I got to this book through a very odd way. I was studying existential risks and, pandemics and, end of the world's doom scenarios. And I was scratching my head. What is it that unifies all of these in terms of one big mitigation move that would basically clean up all this mess so that we got back on track to trying to build a better world? And the only thing I could come up with was the workforce. It's the only single enormous lever that you could pull. And if all of us at work, where we are at our most mindful, perhaps more mindful than we, even when we cast our votes, we are very mindful about work. And if we then all upgrade, individuals and organizations, our skills to match the challenge of our time, that was the theory behind the Platinum Workforce.
You said one provocative thing in your intro that I wanted to unpack a little bit, because I think I agree with you in principle, but it requires more explanation. You said knowledge is superfluous, and we need to first explore our respective definitions of knowledge. What does knowledge mean to you in that context?
Yeah, and I mean, it was a provocative statement because knowledge means many things to me. And I am certainly not saying that there is no body of knowledge that is still relevant or interesting. My point provocatively is simply that what we think is the unique domain of human knowledge is transforming very, very fast. And what was taught before is not what needs to be taught, not in the future, but I mean, actually right now. So the very notion of knowledge as something that resides in a canonic kind of literature that humans built is going out the window. I mean, it was out the window already with Google, but it is now definitely out of the window with AI. We are moving into an era of contemporaneous reshaping of knowledge at a scale that we don't know before and we haven't seen. And currently, it is run by various converging statistical engines. And statistics is very interesting because it's a domain very dear to me. I was very good at it, may I say. I love the subject. My dad was actually published a book on statistics. I'm really into statistics. But it is a very different principle. And it's an earth-shaking principle. Even when the discipline was invented, it was invented in France to count armies and what to do with large armies. So they started developing statistics there. But it has immense world consequences once you apply one type of method to assigning weights to something as fundamental as knowledge. It was disruptive when you started counting items in arsenals and people within the army institution, and it is of course transformational in the economy overall. But when you start using it to change how knowledge is not just used, but actually what is and what counts as knowledge, then we're in completely new territory. And it's not even a given that we will stay there very long, right? Because there's alternative algorithms for AI being developed as we speak. It could be very possibly be that we are just in a transitional moment. We are getting to a platform which is very imperfect. That platform we have over-invested in, both in terms of human significance and in energy terms, in every term. However, it may get us to some other point, which is kind of what I'm pointing to in Platinum Workforce. Once we get to that other point where we are far from today, but there is no telling when, then basically the game changes. And what I'm saying is that in that new environment, knowledge is probably not going to play the same role that it did before. I mean, that's like a short way of saying it, but I think it points to what I think is the conclusion of my book, and I can get there really fast, is that the only knowledge that counts right now is system awareness. That is the only thing. And however you can get to it, I spent 350 pages explaining how we can get to it now, and however you can get to it individually. An organization will try to aspire to understand the systems they are part of and want to exploit. A country is trying to do it. We are trying to do it as a geopolitical entity right now. And there's cascading effects everywhere. I'm spending 15 hours a day right now mapping a cascade language to try to understand this new world that we are entering. So anyway, knowledge used to be something where you said there are some people and they define knowledge for us, and we then digest it, right? The concept of authority vested in scientific, technical, any kind of expertise, maybe even in institutions, the church earlier. Well, that institution used to be science in the 21st century. And the question is it going to be that in the next century? And I think it's currently an open question. It could very well be that that entity is a set of AIs, and that the human role is relegated to basically coordinating those knowledge domains. So it's not that knowledge is less important, it is that it changes characteristics, and the coordination element of knowledge becomes the important part. And that has impact on HR because it means what it is to be a value-creating organization is not the same as it was before. It doesn't matter if you're good at coordinating human teams. It matters how you understand, orchestrate, and capitalize on systems.
Thank you for unpacking that. I know from reading your writing that we share common belief. I distinguish information-based knowledge from experience-based knowledge. Right. And I feel like the the former can be perhaps relegated to machines, but the latter can't be. And I know that's consistent with one of the themes in Platinum Workforce is your concept of socio-technical thinking,
Right.
and where the partnership between humans and machines can fail with AI projects. Maybe if you could discuss that concept and how it relates to the thesis of Platinum Workforce.
Yeah, so socio-technical is a concept that implies that these are not separate entities. They get kind of co-created together, meaning it's not like we have a society, and then there's a technology that gets invented that changes things, and then humans adapt to it, and basically they are independent entities. These things, there are humans that are behind creating technologies, but much more than that, every day we use a technology, the technology changes. We domesticate it. We employ it to our own means. However, there are limitations within each technology. You kind of encode different ways you can use it, different kind of prioritized ways, and there are always gates around technologies, and those are very, very important. And today we speak of it kind of as, the importance of AI governance, that kind of thing, where we're trying to set limits for what is the appropriate role of an AI, for example. But socio-technical is just the very important concept that you kind of have to watch these two things simultaneously. You can't study one or the other. They are not separable. There is not one thing that creates or causes the other. They are mutually constitutive to the society that we are in. And that's hard to unpack because it goes against the Enlightenment sort of interest in like information. It goes against science insistence on causality, perhaps, because it creates feedback loops that are uncomfortable to think about and very hard to operationalize and understand even. It creates systems maps that bewildered even MIT scientists from the 70s onwards, and the Club of Rome, with their limits to growth, that whole idea of systems and complexity theory at the Santa Fe Institute. Very smart people have been thinking about this for 30, 40, 50 years, and we are nowhere near a standardized, simple vocabulary that explains the relationship between socio-technical things that matter.
One of the themes that runs throughout a lot of your work is that, I'm paraphrasing obviously, and you can disagree with me, but humans define and control our relationship with machines rather than the other way around. And it's insane to me editorializing, but that you and I are in the minority, that we believe that. What's your argument for why it is the case that humans get to define how technology enters or impacts our lives?
Well, I think the argument is somewhat more nuanced in the sense that I think it is now possible to use AI to help humans coordinate other AIs. And in fact, I don't think there's a way around it, just from the sheer impact of the AI-based reasoning that we're seeing, even in this current state. So it's not that humans are the ultimate arbiter for everything. There are things where no one's going to the way no one questions when a calculator, for the most part, when a calculator says that 4 times 4 or 4 times 96 is a number, we have tested that enough times that even so, if it was subject to statistics, which current search engines are, or current AIs, LLMs are, you could actually get a different answer every time because it's approximating. Whether it's numerical, and actually specifically if it's numerical right now, it approximates. So you should be worried. But if you're working with a bounded system where the answer has been coded into the machine, then it's simply arithmetic. So it could be very advanced arithmetic, but it's not up for debate. And in that case, a calculator is far better than me or any other PhD. and there are many, many domains that will be like that. And we cannot even fathom controlling machines without having access to that kind of knowledge. So it's not that humans will control machines forever. It is more a principle that sort of says there has to be a way to react when machines start doing undesirable things. And what that means is a political question. People won't agree what that is. The most important question to settle in this decade is the military, and I'm writing a book about that, as I'm also writing a book on AI and science. Those two different things, very different domains, regulated in a different way. They're actually much more important than what happens to the overall workforce immediately. The workforce ultimately is the most important, but we could destroy the world by autonomous weapons before that happens. And likewise, we could contaminate science so badly in the next decade that it doesn't really matter what the workforce does after that. We have completely given up our control of what counts as knowledge. So these two institutions, in my view, are the most important to not just rein in, but really just understand what's going on there. And then workforce is going to be just an ongoing challenge, and it will change, I think, much slower than people think. That doesn't mean it's not important. I wrote a book about it. I am very concerned, but I think it is not an immediate challenge where we will all be out of work in 2027 or 2029 when people say singularity is coming or anything like that. Even if the current AI state keeps to the scaling laws and keep scaling in capability the way it has in the last 5 years, you and I or a guy on the factory floor, we're not going to be out of work. It's just simply not going to happen. I can tell you that. I have stopped giving sort of futurist prognostications because that's, it's more useful to give scenarios. But on this very issue, I will stand my ground.
Today's episode is brought to you by my company, PeopleRain. As you hopefully know, PeopleRain is the AI platform that automates work. Tens of millions of employees around the world get back 4 to 6 hours per week because PeopleRain automates away the friction. Imagine a world where your teams never have to wait for technology upgrades or to have a human reset their password or get added to a distribution list or get help with payroll, PTO, or benefits. Inbox zero for the help desk, zero friction for employees. That's the future of work. That's PeopleRain. We're offering all members of Team Human, and hey, that's you, our listeners, an exclusive discount on PeopleRain just for being part of this amazing community. Get the discount code at peoplerain.io/podcast. That's PeopleRain, like the reign of a king or queen.io/podcast. Now back to this week's conversation. So you're talking to an audience of members of what we call Team Human, and they're listening to you and to this podcast because they believe that the future of humans is positive. And yes. And if I make Trond king of the world for a day and say, what can Team Human go out and do to influence this outcome that you and I both want, where humans will not be enslaved by machines, this dystopian narrative, does not have to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. What's the coaching that you give people who want to make sure that we coax humanity around that outcome?
Yeah, so there's a short and a long answer. The long answer is I have 350 pages about it. There's a little framework on the front cover. I'm trying to see if some of the readers could see it. But basically, there are these 12 skills that I don't think it's very reasonable to say as an individual, you should spend your 10,000 hours, the famous 10,000 hours learning them. If you start counting 12 times 10,000 hours, you're retired before you achieve any of those. So it's more of a aspirational type of project where you say, these are the things that, to my current knowledge, having gone through hundreds of thousands of articles and books to create this view, these are the 12 domains that will survive any conceivable next AI wave. And what survive means will depend a little bit, but, we can go into a couple of examples. The socio-technician one, we have already started to cover. So honing your expertise in how you and how your organization and how society overall relates to technology as a constellation of two things that can't be separated. There are subjects. For example, my PhD was in science and technology studies. There are many engineering subjects that have covered this area. There is systems dynamics. There is cybernetics. There are engineering subjects that have been very aware of systems for a long time. And there are independent approaches within sustainability that work very deeply on these like systems transitions topics. So exploring those, you can never go wrong. But there are some very simple things you can do that are also not going to be wasted. So one sounds very simple, but it's hard in practice, is maker skills. And maker skills, were made kind of popular by the do-it-yourself sort of manufacturing wave of like 3D printing and all that stuff. But for me, it's a little bit like that book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, if you remember that one, by Robert Pirsig. So the idea here is simply that whatever skill you hone that involves both hand and mind, which is MIT's motto. I was at MIT for almost a decade. It'll change what those skills are. And we all have one particular skill that we love in that domain. I have two, for example. I play classical guitar, and I think that has prepared me for this fusion between art, technology, and knowledge and experience that we are now all living. And we don't have time to go further into it unless you ask me. But then the other example might be, so beyond music, there's the simple thing of knowing how to make anything. And we all are good at making something. Once you stop thinking of yourself as a maker, the MacGyver skill for people in the US who are older, who watched that show, if you can't make something out of nearly nothing, you are actually not so useful anymore. Because if you can't fill the gaps, there's machines for all the rest. So if you can't fill niches that keep showing up, you are not going to be very useful in the workplace. And the instinct is honed through physical relations with things like a guitar, things around you. If you know how to fix things around the house, whatever system you can fix. Used to be you can fix a computer, take apart your typewriter. You can use your own example. If you don't have maker skills, and I love woodworking, that was the other example I was going to give you. And Pirsig loved motorcycle maintenance. And that cues up the macro skills related to maker skills is essentially maintenance. Because systems maintenance is not something we can fully outsource to machines. Because they simply, like us, will have the interest of always altering something. But for humanity, we need to make sure that what we have built, what we have invested in, it becomes infrastructure. And we are currently not taking good care of it. And there are many finite limits to materials. So if we don't maintain stuff, we will be in deep, deep trouble for sustainability reasons, for productivity reasons. So I think learning how to maintain and make stuff is a very tangible, maybe the most tangible skills in this new era that we're going into. And it kind of ties to the other most tangible of these 12 skills, which is what I call place maximizing. This arose out of my PhD work, where back in the old days when the internet was young, there was this notion, which we now have experienced post-COVID, but in 1997 with the internet, people thought you would be a nomadic worker immediately. And everyone said it's going to happen this year. You will be living on an island, you will never see your employer, and it's going to all be wonderful. Well, I was critical about that back in 97 for a number of reasons, but turns out that maximizing where you are and actually choosing very consciously where your physical body is located is an indicator of preference. People see it, and it's also an indicator of learning. Wherever you are not physically today, and perhaps with virtual reality too, will still be the most ideal place to learn. There are a couple of exceptions where learning is so expensive materially. Like, I know some people who are enhancing learning for astronauts who are docking at the International Space Station. That would be one liminal case where I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to put 10 astronauts up there and train on a daily basis on how to dock, because it's so expensive to send something up there, and you want to make sure that those people who are up there are pre-trained. But apart from that really very liminal case, learning in a place-maximizing kind of way is really going to be always preferable.
So that's brilliant advice at the micro level, which is a question I asked. What can humans do to influence the outcome we want? A lot of the book is about the macro level. So maybe look a decade ahead. What should or what will do you expect the workforce need to look like so that, if everyone takes your advice on the micro level, we've kind of retooled or reskilled the workforce? What does the new workforce look like?
Well, the biggest worry now among people who know the workforce is training junior employees, because this current AI wave has led to this idea that we can cash in on early efficiencies and reduce the workforce. It's a very intriguing idea. I understand where it comes from. If I was an employer right now, I might even be tempted to enforce it and capitalize on it. But it carries a risk that you have integrated a failure mode into your organization. So if you don't train juniors, there is nobody to become the next senior. So that's a fundamental one. I would say it's so important that even if you go into deficits this year and next, as long as you stay over water, this would be the one thing to do. Do not get tempted to try to do more with less, rather do more with the same. Because if we as a society and overall as a workforce fall into this trap, what will happen is simply that things will start to shrink, skills would start to whittle, and we have to rebuild those through technology. They will be done differently and probably not better. So that's kind of number one. Number two is, I think we're not trying for perfection. You should be, as an organization, experimenting, dramatically increasing your experiments. Some small, some larger. It's not that, the old saying like change is constant. It's simply that experimentation is productivity these days. There is really no productivity without experimentation. So experiments get cheaper. You can do them digitally. You can simulate things. You can do a lot of things by digital means. So it has lower cost than it did before. But I think an employer that doesn't experiment and doesn't explore different scenarios really won't be an employer very long.
Well said. We're here talking about the future relationship between humans and machines and implications for society. I believe that you and I share a similar perspective on this topic, and I'd like to get our audience your perspective on this one. Humanoid robots, or the physical embodiment of AI. There are 8 billion humans on the planet, and they're really good at doing human things. Maybe we don't need to think about the future of the physical embodiment of AI in kind of a narcissistic view of they must look like what humans look like if they're going to supplement our work. Not to bait the witness, but would love to get your perspective on how we think about building AI that in the physical world.
So I want to be a little careful here because one, it's a mega trend. Physical AI is the biggest trend this year. I think most techies and investors have tired a bit on AI, actually. And they realized that the paradigm isn't scaling the way they wanted to, and the productivity effects are not going to come as immediately as we thought. So that's one. So then they're looking for something else. So then physical AI becomes it. And then that introduces all the people who have loved robotics from the get-go. And don't get me wrong, I love robotics. I think it's exciting. I'm a sci-fi writer. I'm currently finishing my novel, which is based on science fiction. There's plenty of robots in there. That's not the issue. But I think as a structural solution to increasing productivity, it is one thing. But as a replacement tool for the billions of workers we have today, it's a very, very bad option. And then optically, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense to go too soon to humanoid robots for two reasons. Number one, they're scary. And whether they are imperfect but kind of eerie looking and do weird things and scare us for that reason, or they're very, very scary when they obviously start to be fooling you on a daily basis, so that you have to develop these new radars that I'm sure we have to develop, which is like, is this a human kind of a thing? So this is more of a futuristic worry, but the big robot makers these days, they are very, very close, both in terms of language. I don't know if you have listened to the way LLMs speak to you over the last few weeks, but they have gotten major upgrades. They have the same kind of pauses and stuff in conversation that you and I have. And it's also been clear that soft robotics for the last few years have been making tremendous improvements. So what that means is the whole, Tom Cruise, masks and stuff is getting much more realistic. So that's not rocket science anymore. It's not that we can't do it or couldn't conceivably produce humanoid robots that would, for all practical purposes, walk and run like humans and have 10x, 100x the power in certain use cases. And it's useful for specific domains. But for my past book, Augmented Lean, my co-author Nathan Linder and I explored factory work. And even there, where robots demonstrably are useful, it has taken an enormous amount of time to get them productively working with humans, because human work is so much more complicated. Frontline factory work integrated with machines for centuries is so human specific that you can have robots in automotive because it's a very simple process. You specify down to the nearest micro terminology and you can produce a metal part and you can put it together. But that is not really what factory work coordination and supply chains, are all about. So that kind of tweaking and understanding what humans have done for centuries there, it's been a fascination of, work and employment researchers and productivity people for forever. But there's a reason why that's a fascination, and it is intricate. It's very, very complex.
So replacing conversation.
Yeah. And the other, I don't know if you were asking about that, but robots in the home setting is obviously scary for a different reason, and also perhaps not enormously useful. Like, I love my dishwasher. And do I like putting dishes into the dishwasher? Perhaps not. But you know what? Folding laundry, it is somewhat annoying, but it actually is, in this idea of doing something other than screens. It's not the worst I do. It gets me thinking. So we have to, I think, why are we automating? What tasks is it that we now think we need to automate? And it goes down to a civilizational, really macro question. You asked, what are the macro implications? Well, I call it becoming the Giga-Scale operator in the book. And it's simply tied to this idea that humans, we got pretty good at organizing ourselves at the micro and meso levels. meaning we built entire management schools to handle the typical American cubicle situation that happens in New York and Minneapolis and all these big American cities and now around the world. Organizing the corporation that has up to 10,000, occasionally 50,000 employees, that's a management school challenge. Organizing teams, working with digital technologies, coordinating all these things. Humans got decent at it. Not very good, but decent. But it took 10,000 business schools. It took, a lot of stuff to get there, engineering, tweaking. We are not prepared for the next level. When projects start to cost 3 billion, 30 billion, 100 billion, these are currently the Giga-Scale problems we have. But in the future, these will be the normal projects that are just running things. If you have to upgrade the electrical grid in the US, which we do, that's a Giga-Scale challenge. It is complicated, but it's also pedestrian. The biggest problem for AI right now is the lack of electricians. Because the data centers, if you are Elon Musk and you say, which he did last week, oh, it turns out I made a mistake with my AI company. I went about it the wrong way. Okay, well, it depends what he means. But if he means he has to retool even his data center, if he has to start there, the 3,000 electricians he needs for that job, they don't exist. And even if they exist, coordinating them together with, and let's just take another example, the Saudis, are building a new city. Oh, the future. Well, they're always building a new city in the future in the Middle East. And the problem is, we have no idea how to coordinate that scale. And when we don't have any management frameworks for how to do it, we screw up to the tune of billions of dollars. Bent Flyvbjerg, who's the world expert on mega projects. I have his book right here, actually, Mega Projects and Risk. And he says at that scale, every project is double or triple the price that you say it will be. It takes double as long or more, depending on the sector and depending how modular the project is. So the Giga-Scale operator will understand all this. The only thing I haven't figured out in the book is where are the data sets and the best practices to build on. I am building, with the help of the Flyvbjerg database and my own database that I'm building of these mega projects and what turns to go wrong. I'm trying to build a knowledge base on this, but there's extremely few people working on it, perhaps because the demand isn't there yet. But this is a future task. It doesn't help us to have 5 billion people and 50 billion robots and, let's call it 100,000 really smart robots that have the latest chips if we cannot coordinate them. So how is that going to happen? And are we going to relegate all of that to AIs? Well, that would be a very scary world. That is probably when we could get the famous factory that optimizes to create binders and clips, paper clips, instead of optimizing to human goals. So it sounded like a crazy anecdote at the time. I don't know if people have read Bostrom's book about superintelligence, but he has this idea that, an AI factory would start optimizing to the wrong things. It sounded crazy at the time. It may be one of the smartest little anecdotes that are out there. I don't think this is going to be the biggest problem with the workforce and AI, but it is worth thinking about how we set objectives. But more importantly, how do we operate at scale? And it is not about teamwork in the traditional sense. It's not about more people sitting watching workers work. We actually need to understand how to work with not one AI. Like you and I on a daily basis, work with 3 AIs that I have tailored to my use case. And I keep evolving them every day. And then they break. And I have to work differently with them. And then a new patch is issued or a new product, and I have to work even more. This is 15 hours of my day. And I have started to work with them at night. When I sleep, they work. But the thing is, these agentic systems, if they work well, then they are impersonations of what you want it to do. If they don't, they do something bad. And you can imagine that when you are recreating a new space station or doing asteroid mining or even just pedestrian stuff. You're digging into the Earth's crust to dig out material that you need to build the next microchip or your next electric car, which needs all these earth minerals. Whatever big project you're engaged in, they better not go wrong on a daily basis, because the environment can't bear it and the costs will be astronomical. And there's no educational institution where I would send you to learn this stuff right now. Do not go to business school. Do not even go to engineering school, basically, because at this scale, everything they will teach you is based on the mechanic age. And that's not where we are.
Trond, we're about out of time, but I can't let you off the hot seat without answering one last important question for me. Before we started the recording, you and I were talking about Trond today and maybe some of the impediments that you face being a very, progressive user of AI. Fast forward a decade, what will Trond plus AI or plus machines look like that's different from maybe some of the obstacles you face today?
I mean, the first thing is persistence. The biggest challenge in a AI system right now is that it doesn't persist beyond your immediate context window. And the reason that's a problem is the two areas that I was really worried about: military and science. Because without persistence, you can imagine science was constructed as a business where we are very transparent. You invent a new method, you have to explain the method, you have to be able to reproduce the method. This is currently not possible with AI. We have to be, and I got to believe that if it doesn't happen naturally or through investment, that governance structures within 10 years go in and say, well, if you can't build something that persists or the context persists, we can't have it. And we certainly can't have it for fundamental productivity. So I would expect AI in a decade from now to be persistent, meaning your AI assistant and the various systemic AIs that are running important key systems in the world, whatever they may be, energy grids, knowledge systems, education. I work with Answer with 2Rs.ai, an education trust and verification platform. These things I expect to be solved by that time. And in addition to kind of persistence, there is obviously transparency itself. So I'd expect you to understand what this AI is doing for you. And I expect everybody to understand what these very complex systems are doing to society and doing to your company. So within 10 years, I think every employee actually, hopefully, will have more, not less, ownership to their work product and to the transparency of what the ultimate products are of the organizations they work for. Those are important kind of moral paradigms, but they're also productivity paradigms. And I think we have to get there. There is a scenario where we are not there in 10 years, where the workplace becomes more opaque. It goes towards even more monopolistic endeavors. Fewer, not billionaires, trillionaires, run everything. Some governments catch on and become part of this like trillionaire type league player. And then workers are either left behind or simply just not decision makers. But I think you and I subscribe to the idea that there's now still time to intervene and create a society where essentially people reign, like you point out, important, and AIs are not relegated to assistants, because by that time, many AIs will be so advanced that to call them, in fact, I have a whole like word cloud about what we typically call assistants. And they're all currently used for what we desire AIs to be doing now and in the future. But if you look at it throughout work history, we have always had a category of worker who we call the menial worker. And there are hundreds of terms that I logged in my book, Platinum Workforce, and they are sexist terms, they are materialist terms. They speak badly of people with less resources. They are ethnically problematic, all these terms. But they share one thing in common, and they have this idea of a hierarchy of work. And it's an extremely dangerous idea that we carry with us as a legacy, because it gets turned upside down now with AI. We are in a period where conceivably AIs are more advanced than us. So if we want to remain on top of that pyramid, we have to recontextualize work itself. And we can't have this like hierarchical idea of what is worth something. We may still have to classify work in terms of how much we pay for it. But if we have a moral category that says, if you really are that productive, then you should have a moral status as a leader, then you have to give up to AI already. I would say there are AIs right now that are more deserving of the kind of credit we gave to the worker in the 18th, the manager in the 18th century, and that the difference is bigger than that between the factory owner in 1850 and the menial worker, or whatever. The difference between an AI and even a CEO today in terms of decision-making capability, systemic understanding. So if you have a very limited view of what work is, we have already lost to AI. I mean, we don't have to wait for the next iteration. There are many ways in which, if I was not using AI 15 hours a day, I might as well have packed up. But because I use it productively, you and I were talking about this, not only has my production of articles and insight gone up, but the level within that argument has also gone up. And there is no AI right now that could write what I just wrote before we stepped into this podcast. But in order for that to remain true, you have to work hard, probably harder or smarter. So you started out saying AI gives you an hour back. I want to believe that too. 1 hour. It is not going to give you 8 hours back. If you do not integrate deeply with AI now, you will not be working in the future. You will literally be just receiving the state pension or nothing. And then your family will be paying for you, or your friend will be paying for you. That much is true. But if you do engage with AI, you have a bright future. And that future better be a broad set of AIs, because otherwise the platinum workforce becomes a platinum layer on top of a rusty, horrible workforce. And that's what we need to avoid, and we need to start working on that now. I do not think it's an immediate challenge. I really don't think AI is going to destroy the world in terms of the workforce over the next decade. I just don't believe it. I could be wrong. I do, however, think that sooner or later, we have to all start taking and getting opinions about what kinds of AI we want to build and how we want to be part of building it and co-create this socio-technical AI that we need. And if we don't, then I think the people who say AI will take over, they're going to be right in the sense that some AIs and some monopolistic employers will take over. The augmented people will take over. That's for sure. Let's hope that the augmented people means the entire workforce. That is really, and I don't know that a decade is the right timeline for this, because as I outline in the book, there is one path for regulated industries, which is very slow, and there's one path for unregulated industries, which is usually quite fast. But people are also slow. So we need to get everybody on board here, or it doesn't really matter if technology follows scaling laws, because people don't follow scaling laws unless they work with AI, and then they can follow to some extent scaling laws. And we can perhaps also slow down AI where it needs to be slowed down.
Well, we're going to have more opportunities to pick up where we're leaving off. This has been a great conversation. And in particular, I want you to know that you're invited back when you publish your science fiction book, and we would love to, use that as a jumping off point for the next conversation. Trond, just an absolute pleasure. Congrats on all the progress, and we're all rooting for you and your good ideas to proliferate. Brilliant. All right. Well, that is all the time we have for this week on AI and the Future of Work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.
Yo, it's the end of the show, time to power it down. AI's the sis, but humans wear the crown. Team Human in the house, got the vibe so clever. Dan Turchin from PeopleRain, making us better. We learned about AI for humans. We're ready to conquer the future, that's all for now. See you next time.